What's up, everybody? How's it going today? Well, a lot of you may know already that I have really no love for the DEA. I really have no love for most of the law enforcement. I'm actually embarrassed by the way that law enforcement operates in this country, which folks would say, well, look at these other countries and how bad it is over there, and look at what you can and can't say. And I would say, yeah, I understand that, but for a country that prides itself on freedom of speech and rule of law, our own protectors don't exactly follow their own rules. And I'm not going to necessarily blame just the cops. I'm going to blame the public for being suckered into watching all these TV shows over the years. If you look at all the cop dramas and all the cop shows that have come out, what's the number one thing they do in almost every episode? They break the law and they justify it. So I'm going to tell you a specific case in point that happened here in Portland the other day. It's just I don't usually share news stories, but since it was local, I had to share. So, first off, a little backstory here about the situation. The DEA had been following these two guys, or I believe it was a guy and a girl, for some time. They were from Texas, and they would fly up to Portland, and they would transport large amounts of weed back down to Texas and sell it. And they had found all this cash at the airport in one of their luggage last year sometime. So it caused them a suspicion, and so they got flagged and they started following them. I'm not going to give you all the details, I'm just going to tell you the main point of the story. So these guys had been storing their weed in a storage space in Portland. The DEA had been tracking the GPS on their phones. They found out that they'd stopped at this storage space. So what they did was they went in, they broke into the storage unit, and they found 487 pounds of pot. So what did they do? Well, instead of waiting or staking it out or coming back with a warrant, they went and they got what you call a delayed warrant. And a delayed warrant is basically where they go to the judge and say, look, we've got to get this before these people move it or take it away. And the warrant doesn't require that you inform anybody about it. So what they did was they broke in, they took the weed, and they left the lock broken, making it look like a break-in. And then they left. The manager came the next day, found the broken lock, they figured it was a break-in. And they repaired it, and on goes business for a few days until finally the DEA, a few days later, calls the owner of the storage space and says, oh yeah, by the way, we took some weed out of here, but we got to keep it quiet. A couple days later, these two armed guys show up. They ask for look at a storage space. When the manager goes to show them around, they pull out a gun, stick it in his face, and push him into the storage space. Now, they filmed this whole thing on their cell phone. And the reason why the video came out is because the cops eventually did catch them. And they tried to break their cell phone, but they were able to get the video to use in court. And the video, it was him holding up the camera with the gun to the dude's face. The other guy was duct taping his ankles and hands. And they insisted that this manager had stolen their weed. And the guy, just this poor scared dude, but he did pretty well, handled himself pretty well. But when you have a gun pointed in your face and somebody is threatening to kill you, it's kind of hard not to freak out. And this guy's life was in danger because of incompetent policing, incompetent operations. So here's what happened. They ended up catching the people, busted them down the way, wherever it might have been. They were following them in their GPS. And now they're facing kidnapping and assault charges. But they haven't even filed any weed charges. This whole thing about cannabis, what it's done is this cannabis, something so benign, regardless of whether they're criminals or they're an enterprise or they're trafficking or they're making money, it's just pot. And once again, just because of pot, somebody's life is put in danger because the DEA is incompetent in doing their job. And I just thought that story would be, I'm going to try to share I'll share the link if I remember in the description, so you can see it for yourself. But it's pretty ridiculous that the police wouldn't at least wait it out or arrest the guys, or if they're following them on GPS, that they would know when they go back to the storage space. This is complete incompetent policing. And it's not just arrests like this. I mean, these are the big busts, and you don't hear about a lot of these unless it's local. The ones that are most concerning are the civil forfeiture laws, where a lot of folks don't know this. Of course, if you bust a big-time dope trafficker, they can take all of their goods, and that's, basically stealing. But they can say that it was bought with drug proceeds. It doesn't matter if you're even really selling drugs or not. If you get busted with intent to sell, they can confiscate your car, your house, everything. And they don't even have to prove that you bought it with drug money. What's worse, if you're accused of a crime, say you get pulled over, and the cop sees some cash in the car, and you're going to buy, and this has happened a lot of times. You're going to buy something, and the cops asked if you have cash in the car. They do this a lot in Tennessee because of all the trafficking through that state. And if the person says, oh, well, I've got some money in the trunk, I'm going to buy a car in California, or I'm going to buy a house, or I'm going off to college, like some of these actual stories were, the cops can still take the money and never give it back. They don't even have to file a charge on you or arrest you for anything to take your money. Civil forfeiture is a huge issue, and billions of dollars in assets are confiscated by the government, yearly, that do not get given back to the people who rightfully own them. And this is theft, pure and simple. I guess I could go on and on about this. There's so many facets to this, and I don't want to sit here and demean every single public, office. I do respect the fact that many of these agencies have prevented attacks. They've prevented cartels from springing up. But here's the whole thing you've got to ask. Why would people want to attack in the first place? It's usually because of U.S. policies. Why are people trafficking drugs into our country in the first place? That's because of U.S. policies. It's because we refuse to legalize drugs and move on into the future, to realize that adults should have the right to choose and use what they like. I mean, the black market will always exist, but as long as there is so much resistance to people's personal choices of what they consume, we will continue to put individuals' lives in danger, like the poor guy who just went to work in the morning and had a gun stuck in his face because, the DEA is too incompetent. The DEA, I've had my own issues with them. They sent me a letter a couple of years ago saying, we've confiscated your shipment, which was all it really was defined as ground leaf, because at that time, kratom was still kind of up in the air as to whether it was legal. So they flagged it as improperly labeled because it didn't specifically say mitragenous speciosa, kratom, on it. And then they sent me a bill basically saying their estimated value was like $20,000 or something. It was way above what it actually was. And I never got it. They held up millions of pounds of kratom in customs from just casual people ordering overseas, not because it was legal to do so, but because they figured that they could stem the tide by just making it hard for people to obtain what they need. And with the opioid crisis, going on the way it is, I don't think kratom should be a major drug of concern. In fact, it's just so ludicrous and so ass backwards how we operate in this country, and it's often drug laws that are the biggest problems. The prison complex, the whole prison system is designed to make money, so it's difficult to break that away from all the funding these agencies claim to need. And these agencies have to justify their expenditures. So they go on all these unimportant stakeouts. They waste your time and mine. Hell, there have even been stories of FBI agents joining sewing circles after 2001 to hear what the old ladies were talking about in case there was a whole article about it. It was a big deal. That they realize how much money is being spent of taxpayer money to watch us, the people, and to try to bust us for our own, what we choose to say or consume. And I think it's ludicrous. I'm all for government staying the hell out of people's business, but anytime there's money involved, that's when they're interested. They don't want to bust, they don't want to deal with any low-level stuff. They want the big guys so they can get the big money. Because a lot of folks also don't realize that police agencies, many states have deals where if you take people's, if you confiscate people's wealth, their money, their jewel, their cars, anything during a drug bust, then some agencies get to keep the money, some agencies get to keep half or a percentage of the money. And right there, that shows where their priorities are going to lie. If they can buy themselves a new tank, might as well go bust this guy instead of dealing with the issues like taking care of the local community and doing what an officer should do. Walk the beat, get to know people, not always looking for criminals, but being there as a public servant. I hate to say it. There was a video a couple years ago of a couple cops who pulled over these black kids and got them out of the car, and the usual white cop, black kid thing. Except for this time they searched the car for like 5 minutes straight. You could see it on all the cameras. There's nothing in there. And then 5 minutes later, one of the cops' cameras, he turns it off. And then all of a sudden he turns it back on a few minutes later and says, "Oh, look what I found." And he says he found a lit joint on the rear passenger floor. A lit joint, burning joint, that had been burning for 5 full minutes after 2 cops had searched the car completely, top to bottom. He all of a sudden finds a lit joint. And you can see him going in and fiddling with something in the car. I mean, this cop planted evidence on someone. And then he was talking to the other cops and he's like, "Well, should we take them all in? Should we take them all in?" He was hungry. He was hungry for an arrest. And the other cop's like, no, just the driver, just the driver. And the guy's like, "You sure? You sure?" I mean, cops like this type of, this mentality of, us versus them, it just causes further division. And the thing about this case was planting that evidence. The cop got off scot-free. The cops have gotten off and always been, the courts have always sided with the officers. Only in recent years have any cops gone to jail for anything. And that's only from blatantly shooting somebody. You might have to shoot him 100 times in the back before you'll go to prison. I mean, there was a case a while back, last case I'm going to say, this guy had his car stolen, and it was reported stolen. Well, he got his car back, and he was driving to work at 6 in the morning, or home, or whatever it might be. The cops saw the car, gave chase. He ran for some reason. He had his own issues, I'm sure. But in the end, the cops pulled out their guns and shot his car something like I don't even know, like 100 times. The very last thing that the guy did, one of the cops jumped up on the hood of the car and put like 12 full rounds through the windshield. Oh, was that a different one? There was 2 of them. There was one where there was a woman and a guy in the car. Does it really matter how many cops have to shoot up a car to the point where, with the person that never had a weapon? I mean, these cases are important. I don't want to sound like I'm sitting here talking bad about cops. There are a lot of good cops out there, and I highly respect those out there. If you are an officer of the law, or you know somebody who follows the law and, does their job respectfully, I commend them for that, because that's damn hard. Because if you don't follow, the operations of the officers, then you're the outcast. You will be ignored. If you bring up anything that the other cops are doing, you try to be the hero for the people and saying, "Hey, I'm going to expose corruption in my own force," you'll lose not just your job, but you might lose your life. I mean, it's a scary proposition to be a cop in this country. I get it. But if you're going to choose that route, I hope a person would be honest enough to not plant evidence on someone just to make an arrest, because that is one of the most abhorrent, disgusting things I can imagine. The public has enough to worry about. We all do. If we're real for a moment, all of us have problems in our lives. If you're a cop or you're a criminal, when you take off your clothes at night and get in bed, you're the same people. You're people who have needs, wants, desires, who care about some things, who get frustrated about things. All of us do. And it's so easy for us to want to make it an us versus them thing. I would love to see the people come together, but it seems that we're always going to be divided over certain issues. I think that that's okay. But there are other issues that the people need to speak up about. And one of those is expecting more from our police, and expecting more from our FBI, our CIA, our DEA. They have done a lot of horrendous things over the years, and I won't even go into any more detail. Thanks for listening, and let me know what you think. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And as always, thanks to my subs, thanks to my patrons, and I'll talk to you soon. Be well.